Conrad, obviously, it's an honor to be here, um, and to just be around, such people, great people that are achieving high goals, that are bringing their teams together. Non-selfish people, people that are willing to pour back into the community, into their people. Um, with you just getting married, right?
Yeah.
How are you kind of taking this business-like mentality into your daily life?
Yeah, well, Jake, always great to be with you, and thank you for being here with us for the last 3 days. What's really phenomenal about this kind of experience that we're having together is you were just with 7,700 people for 3 days that are all trying to improve the quality of their life in some way, right? Some are trying to find out what the next thing is in them for business. For some, it's family. For some, it's wealth creation. For some, it's fulfillment. When people walk in and meet us, we don't know exactly what that thing is. They may not even know specifically. So it's a wonderful environment to be around people that are thinking there's a next level for them. And so what I'm really focused on in my life right now is bringing that holistic view into conversations I have with you or anyone else about how do we create success for them in all aspects of their life. I think to me, true success means you have it in every area of your life. I think there are people that create success in business, but they have challenges in their personal life or haven't attended to building any, relationships of quality, and that's a very lonely place to be. And the inverse is true too. So, I think this is all about how do we empower people, teach them what we know, develop them in a way where they can contribute more and have more of an impact in the world and more fulfillment for themselves.
Well, Mr. Conrad, dive a little deeper on that. I
Yeah.
feel like, especially in America, there's a capitalistic tendency to where if I help this person, they're going to be taking food off of my plate. Why is it that you and the 10X community have, really leaned into helping families, helping the community versus, we got the money, we can just do it ourselves. We don't need you guys.
Yeah, it's a very, very good question. And I think my answer to that might be different than some. I believe there is an abundance for everyone. There's so much money available to all of us on this planet. There is no shortage. And so if you believe that there is an abundance, there is enough, more than enough for everyone. And I think there is a real truth to the fact that if you contribute more to others, inevitably resources and relationships and opportunities flow back to you in a way that can feel at times, why are so many things coming back my direction? It's because you're pouring into others first. So I would encourage people, if they feel like they are operating in scarcity right now, they don't have enough of something, whether that's relationships, if it's finances and resources, instead of focusing on I must take something from someone to have what I need, instead think about how can I give something of value to others. And that shows in a lot of different forms. It can be opening up a relationship, a door. It can be having a new idea. And I've been fortunate in my life where I have had periods, especially when I was building my life and career, where I didn't have resources to give into a project or into an investment or to a company. But I had ideas, I had drive, I had energy, I had creativity, and a strong, authentic desire to contribute something of value to people around me. So I think it's just seeing the world in a way where you just intuitively know there is more than enough for everybody.
Well, Mr. Conrad, take us back. Talk to us about what was high school, early college, if you went to college. What was that like? What was the drive? What were the goals? Like, what did you see for yourself and have you achieved that?
Yeah. So I'll take you back to maybe one, I think, foundational thing that happened to me very young, and that sort of set me on a path. When I was 10 years old, I was the oldest of four children, and my parents split up. And my dad, unfortunately, made the decision to leave our family. And so I was the oldest of four kids and a single mom who just wanted to be a mom, and had to figure out very quickly that I was the man of the house, and saw her being very scared of like what the future looked like. And it, I think, made me an adult before I was a kid in a lot of ways. But what it instilled in me was a work ethic and a desire to succeed and figure things out, kind of confront that maybe fear of how do you go out and create any kind of success in the world, but a strong desire to be able to take myself from that place and put myself in environments where maybe I didn't feel like I always belonged. So I was very fortunate that I was good academically. I was able to play 2 sports in high school. I was around a lot of kids that came from successful families. And I knew I wanted that at some point, but felt like I was maybe a bit of, I didn't belong in some ways. But that I used as fuel to propel me forward. Just thought if I can just keep working hard, I may not be the smartest or have the best resources or the best, family background, whatever the case is, that I'm going to use whatever I have at my disposal to develop myself as much as I can. So I started getting very interested in self-development and learning about things like that in high school, really. My experience going to college was interesting too, because I was, again, very good academically. I had played 2 sports. I had the benefit of 7 different options of where I wanted to go to school, and I made my selection based on what is close enough to home in case the family needs something.
Yeah.
Also, where can I leverage that academic ability to have scholarship and work study funds? And I was putting myself through school, so managing the finances was something that was very important to me. So I went to school full time and worked full time in an environment where a lot of the kids were sent by mom and dad and had everything kind of taken care of. So I had a very different experience going through that process than most did. Again, I felt like I was kind of an adult before I was a kid, but I would not trade that for anything because it made me feel like I'm going to get the most I can out of this experience and develop myself as much as I can and apply that once I kind of get out in the world.
Yeah. Talk to us more, just about that experience. What was the day-to-day life like? Like, I
Yeah.
feel like a lot of people nowadays complain that they can't do work study and get through school. Um, you could just take us
Yeah.
deeper, please.
Yeah. I think you hear some amazing stories about people that come from really challenging environments and create huge success. Mine, I don't think is that, but it was challenging nonetheless because here I'm in an environment where I feel like I don't belong necessarily. I'm there putting myself through school. I'm trying to keep it together. I had a couple classmates who were in a friend group close to me. One of them, their parents sold their business for $500 million. We were a sophomore, tons of wealth around me, and I was just the outlier. I did not have that, and I was very insecure about that, and also very driven to develop myself in a way where I could find that at some point in my life. I also struggled in the social environment around it too, and I didn't expect that or wasn't prepared for that. I grew up because of my upbringing and what happened. I did not drink alcohol. I didn't party, and I was in an environment where a lot of kids did that and did that extensively. And it was not an environment I wanted to fit into, and so it drove me to really start a new hobby. And for me, that was weightlifting and getting into training and bodybuilding. And it's another form of self-development, but for me, that was my kind of safe spot. It was my place to go, and really, it's a solitary pursuit. It's something that I think has a creative aspect to it too, and I could pour energy into it. And it was my new thing. I was like, I'm determined to work full time, put myself through school, do it in 4 years, and I want to explore this new thing of fitness and bodybuilding at the same time. So that was my experience with it. Very different than I think most that go through and have this great social experience. I didn't have that. But instead, I picked up some other skills that I think served me very well later in life.
I want to stay on that point right there. You
Yeah.
said you didn't party.
Yeah.
You weren't really big on alcohol. You didn't do it at all.
Yeah.
Was that a mindset you had going into school, or was it like freshman, sophomore year? Maybe this isn't for me. Let me leave it alone and just focus on myself.
Good question. So for me, it was a decision that I really landed on at 10 years old because I correlated my dad's drinking and that having a damaging effect on our family, and deciding for myself I never want to put myself in a position where that is going to harm my personal relationships or my family. And so I made that choice at 10 years old, and that's something I will not do. And so maybe that's an extreme way to look at that situation. I think at that age, it felt very extreme and it had a dramatic impact on my life. Today, I look at it very positively, where that is just a choice I made. Now, it's hard too, Jacob, when you're in that environment and you're with young people who are really participating in that. the social peer pressure around that is extreme or can be. And for me, the outlet was I'm very strong and convicted on that for my personal reasons. I encourage people can enjoy what they want to if that's something that they can manage in their life and they like that aspect of it. Certainly teach their own. But for me, I was very convicted in that part. And then adding in the fitness component to it, for me, that social aspect, incorporating alcohol, did not fit in what I wanted to do. So for me, it was a relatively easy choice, although a little bit unusual.
Yeah. Mr. Conrad, um, every time I see you, you look like a superhero. You look like a Bruce Wayne, a James Bond. Um, how much is first impressions important to you, and who taught you your fashion, outlook into
Yeah,
the business world?
I thank you for the compliment. You always look the same, right? I know you prioritize that. So I think it's something I look probably like everybody. I looked at movies, I looked at film, I looked at things that creatively inspired me. And I like that idea of presenting yourself in a certain way to the world. And I do think it's important. I think if you meet people that prioritize that, it shows they have an attention to detail. Maybe it's a way they express themselves too. I think for me, it's a combination of I feel my best when I'm put together. I prioritize. I think I respect that when I see that in others. I like the design, creative aspect of fashion and art and things like that too. So I think for me, it's a combination of those elements.
And does fitness play a role in that too,
It
or?
absolutely does. And I'll tell you some anecdotal stories too about that. So I've worked with a lot of different executives and former partners of mine, and I was struck a couple years ago by just the cognitive dissonance of listening to someone talk about healthcare and getting employees healthy and looking at someone who's 50, 60 pounds overweight and thought, this message cannot be delivered by this person in a way that lands effectively. That was my opinion. Now, if you look at today, look at our Make America Make
Yeah.
America Healthy Again initiative and what RFK Jr. is doing. I think he can land that message well because he has prioritized that and he's a healthy individual in his own life. Very difficult to have a health message delivered by people who are unhealthy. And so I do think they correlate.
And kind of switching the frame
Yeah,
going more so towards global and political
yeah,
affairs. You said that you had played two sports coming up through high school
yeah,
and everything.
yeah.
I know with my experience, I played multiple sports as well. My freshman, sophomore year of college, right, I had a Chinese roommate, and that experience changed my life drastically. And we stayed up many, many nights talking about just the differences between American culture and Chinese culture. When we look at the Chinese culture, there are a lot of extraordinarily smart people, and I think that Americans kind of take some of that focus and put it towards athletics. Do you think that's a good move, or what are your thoughts on that?
The prioritization of athletics or entertainment, let's say in this country, versus academics, maybe. There is a very distinct difference if you look at those two cultures, right? I have a lot of admiration for the work ethic and the focus on education that Eastern cultures place. I think sometimes it's maybe too much pressure on those kids to perform at an extremely high level academically. In the West, we do prioritize athletics because I think in the United States, especially, we have embraced that hero mythology.
Yeah.
Um, there's a fantastic author, Joseph Campbell, who wrote a volume of work on mythology, storytelling, essentially. And that hero narrative is just ingrained in our American culture. Right? So I think that's why we gravitate to that as Americans, and we like to see excellence on display. And so sport has become really prioritized. Now, is that a good thing? I think it can be a great thing as long as those that participate, and you and I did, we have the ability to create an identity that is not crushed if we don't make it to a certain level in our particular sport of choice. I think it's hard for kids that have an expectation that they are going to be in the NBA if they don't have the physical skills necessarily, and there's so much luck involved too, in terms of who actually gets drafted and then how long you can stay in the league. So I think there's a healthy balance there of parents giving kids the option to go and explore what they want with athletics and other interests, but then moderating expectations where if they want that as a path, fantastic, go explore it. There should always be a look at what will happen after that.
Yeah.
Because even for the best that make it, there's always the next chapter. Now that may occur at 18 or it may occur at 50. Just depends. But I think those differences you noticed, I think, are very, very stark. And I think our prioritization of athletics is good. Now, I love what you and I probably both gained from athletics, which is discipline, the ability to set a goal, pursue something, work through adversity, be defeated, have failure,
Yeah.
pick yourself back up again. I think those are all valuable parts of that experience.
Yeah. Mr. Conrad, let's talk a little bit more about America and the scope of everything right now. Obviously, we just had a recent election. President Donald Trump is in office now. Tell us, what do you think that means for the young landscape, for young workers? Obviously, there are some people who love them, some people who hate them. Tell me more about the opportunities that are going to be made available to people if they choose to capitalize on them.
Yeah, I think this is the greatest country in the world, and I'm very fortunate, you and I both, to be in this country and have an opportunity ahead of us. What do I think it means? I think every American, regardless of their political affiliation, at the basic level, do they want a life where they can earn more next year than they did last year? I think everybody would say yes. Do they want an ability to have a great home life, comfortable place to live? Do they want opportunities for their kids in the future? Absolutely. Do they want, at some point when they're done working, to have a comfortable and dignified retirement? I think they do. So that is in large part policy driven. So there's the candidate, there's the person in office, but then there is a whole layer of policy that goes with that. And so I think that's what Americans probably should pay more attention to is, are we creating a policy environment that is more favorable for businesses or less favorable? I happen to be very bullish on the environment right now because I think we are getting into a place where we're going to have a pro-America first agenda. We're going to have a little bit of short-term disruption as this tariff strategy plays out, but over the long run, I think we are setting up a very long-term bullish forecast for the American economy and for young people and older people alike who are working and want to capitalize on the American opportunity.
So let's talk a little bit more about capitalizing on the American opportunity. Not everybody works, for a company that's bringing in hundreds of millions of dollars.
That's right.
Not everybody can raise over $1 billion in revenue for a year. What advice would you give to your younger self, before you kind of got into the game?
Yeah. So I would say this, the great part about the American economy is the American dream is what we're really trying to protect and propel forward. Right? That's where policy comes in. So whether you are an employee working in a large company, that company is going to be encouraged to take more risk, put more capital to work, create more jobs because of good policy. If it's a person that wants to go out on their own for the first time and create a new business or buy a business, this is a wonderful environment for that too, because we have programs through the Small Business Administration that are going to be heavily focused on new business creation, new business growth. Again, this is policy. We have a big macroeconomic trend too happening, Jacob, where the stats tell us that by 2030, 5 years from now, all of the baby boomers will be 65 years or older. They also control the majority of the small and mid-sized business segment in America.
Okay.
Now, there are only three things that can happen when that small and mid-sized business owner of that age is 65 or older.
What are the three?
The three are, if there are children or a next generation in the business, they could pass it on, and it stays in the family. Let's say you have a very successful electrical contracting business that's doing $10 million in revenue, but for some reason, the kids are just not interested. I see this and hear about this all the time from entrepreneurs. And so if passing this on to the next generation is not a sure thing. And in past generations, it was almost always a sure thing because there was family obligation, societal pressure to step in and take over what mom and dad had created.
Yeah.
Today, we have far more choices. The children of that entrepreneur who built the plumbing contracting company may want to be influencers online instead of stepping into that kind of business.
100%.
So if that is not a sure thing, then only two other things can happen.
Okay.
They could sell the business or it can close. Now, I think there's a huge opportunity for young people who want to be entrepreneurs to look at, instead of starting a business, go out and buy a business from an entrepreneur who is ready to retire and be a good steward of that business and their legacy and create their own. That can take years off of the process for someone who's entrepreneurial and wants to get into the game of being an entrepreneur, but maybe doesn't have the capital to start something from scratch, doesn't want to take the risk, or some combination of the two.
Mr. Conrad, I want you to be honest with me, right?
Yeah.
Do you think that right now America and even the world is in a time of renaissance? Or do you think this is mumbo jumbo, regular history that we're just living through right now?
I don't think it's regular history, Jacob. I think we are entering into a place where very quickly we will see policy changes that will create pathways for entrepreneurship and business growth that we haven't seen in a very long time, if at all, because there is so much being pushed out of the way very quickly by this new administration. The benefit we have as Americans is this is not a new team coming in trying to figure out what to do. This is a team that is coming back.
It's been in office.
Okay.
They've been around.
And bringing the best minds in business to come in and eradicate some of the things that are in the way of good entrepreneurs and business builders. I think that's good for the country, whether you align on everything or not. Most Americans want that future where they will be able to buy a house. If we get interest rates into a better place soon, and they are starting to, we may be able to have more people buy homes and give incentives for developers to build new homes. Like, that is part of the American story, and that is going to accelerate. We need to create an environment where employers feel comfortable taking risk and creating more jobs. Uncertainty, red tape, heavy regulation is what stalls that kind of activity, and that's good for no one. So I do think we are entering into what I hope will be a golden age where we can solidify good policy that will continue well into the future. Here's the other thing too, Jacob. We are in an environment where you look at our competition around the world, they think very differently than we do in terms of cycles.
Okay.
You mentioned Asia earlier in this conversation. They tend to think in long 100-year cycles in terms of their building. The Middle East does too. We tend to think in very short soundbite cycles of what happened yesterday, and we think in 4-year cycles of elections.
Okay.
I like the idea of leaning into a longer term view of let's build in good policy so that we can create pathways where businesses know what's going to happen with some degree of certainty and can start to put capital to work in a way that creates long-term success and stability to work through.
I've heard you talk about policies a lot.
Yeah.
How important is it going to be for the young people to actually have knowledge of what these policies are, and where should they start to look?
I think it's very important that they should, and I think there are a number of places to look. I think they should get educated on what's actually happening at the legislative level, see what bills are being introduced and how those actually get passed and become laws. And then I would encourage them to build a relationship with their local congressperson. Like, get to know them. These people are accessible to their constituents. They are voted in to represent their base. And so social media is an easy place to turn to for good and bad information. And I would encourage them to take an active role and be a participant in the process, no matter what side you're on. And I love having healthy debates with people who have different views than I do. But if they are informed, it's very different than someone who's ill-informed and jumps into social media to create very inflammatory kind of dialogue.
Clickbaity.
What I would love to see in our country is getting back to a period where we can have a very healthy debate on policy and ideas. To me, that's the highest form of democracy, and I hope we can get to that at some point. I think as a country, maybe we're getting, everything goes in cycles. So maybe this cycle of very inflammatory, clickbaity kind of language and very short-term focus we can migrate away from that or advance beyond that into a place where we can have real healthy debate on things that matter.
Mr. Conrad, tell me a little bit more about your upbringing in the sense of there was no social media. What was it like
Right.
when you found out what Facebook and Instagram and TikTok were?
Yeah.
How was the migration? What did that look like?
Yeah. It's very interesting, and I'm dating myself a little bit, right? Because coming up in a different environment where that just wasn't part of growing up, and so I think what I learned in that process is you built relationships with people like this one to one because there were no devices or distractions in the way. So I think it gave me and my generation skills to build genuine relationships one to one, or maybe it's harder with distractions. So, but then seeing that new technology emerge, I was struck by it because I was in Silicon Valley as a lot of that was happening. So I thought this is going to be an amazing opportunity. And I could see it struck me at the time as this is not a fad. And the dot-com bubble, I think, caused a lot of people to think this might be a fleeting thing that will go away as some of those companies quickly rose and quickly fell.
Yep.
But when you start to look at the technology and what it did, it connected people in new ways to information in new ways. And I thought, this is never going away. I feel the same ways today about what's happening with Bitcoin. I think that's a technology that will be something that we'll look at like the internet. The companies may come and go, but that technology, that core asset, I think is something we'll look at much like we did the internet.
They always say technology never loses.
Yeah.
But what ways do you think Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies will change the future of finance? Because obviously at the time, right, with the birth of the internet, I'm sure no one could have imagined like social media and Web 2.0 and stuff like that. What do you think are some crazy, extraordinary concepts and soon to be everyday uses with crypto?
Yeah. So I'll start by answering the first part, which is what happened when the internet came along. I mean, you think about traditional banking, the idea that people could actually have an account online, money from their employer goes into an account, they can withdraw it, redirect it online without ever going into a branch.
Was that real? I think like I can't imagine what it's like to have cash. Okay, you have check, you have a cash, and you have to tell everybody it's going to be on the phone now. Like you can't touch your money anymore. It's there. I promise you, it's there.
Yeah.
Even credit cards. Like, what was that like?
Yeah. Well, we moved off the gold standard in the 70s, and that spawned this fractional reserve banking system that we have in the United States today, where a dollar goes in and $9, $10 is lent out. What's going to happen now with Bitcoin, I think, is going to be even more revolutionary. So there was a recent change, and I'm going to go back to policy again. So in the banking regulatory code, SAB 121, was a rule that prohibited banks from custodying cryptocurrency. They couldn't hold cryptocurrency. Okay, that was replaced recently with SAB 122, which allows banks to custody cryptocurrency. Now, that seemingly is a small thing, but I think it's a huge thing because it's going to allow banks to now hold native cryptocurrency. And what are banks really good at? Lending against assets. So just like they did with the dollar that you gave them and lent it out 10 times, can they do the same thing with an arguably better asset? Yes, they can. So right now, the lending side of cryptocurrency is in its nascent stage. You have lending firms that have popped up. I think they have done an admirable job. There are some downsides to it as well. I think the loan to value ratios are fairly low. Interest rates can be high. I think the traditional banks, there will be a curve where they may be permitted by regulatory bodies now to custody cryptocurrency, but I think the big institutions will be years away from actually getting into that space heavily. I think it's going to create a new opportunity for fast-moving fintech companies to come along and capitalize on that opportunity. And I think if you look at the big macro picture, we have the administration now who wants a Bitcoin strategic reserve. There's a geopolitical component to this too, Jacob, where we have that playing out on the world stage now. Who is economically safer? A nation that has a world reserve currency and a Bitcoin strategic reserve, or a smaller nation that has amassed a strategic Bitcoin reserve and can potentially compete on the world stage for the reserve currency status. So we're in a very interesting moment right now, and I think the U.S. will win and win big on this front by adopting this. I spent time with Senator Loomis and her team in December and got to meet the team responsible for drafting the bill. And then you've seen several states follow with adopting their own protocol for building a state Bitcoin reserve, and I'm a big proponent of them doing that.
Well, Mr. Conrad, this is going to be my last question for
Yeah.
you here, sir. Um, let's say you have the attention of everybody in the world, right?
Yep.
People that like you, people that don't like
Yep.
you, and they're all listening for about 2 minutes.
Yeah.
What message are you putting out there?
Yeah. I want to put out the message of there are so many opportunities available to people that want to create success for themselves in the construct of business. We have tools, resources to help them do that. I am personally passionate about helping people that have that entrepreneurial gift and spirit unlock their potential through what we know how to do in terms of building systems, structures, and layering into that some of these strategies around wealth creation, wealth preservation for those families. I also want to create environments where we have good policy, we can create pathways for businesses to create jobs, propel the American economy, and ultimately the American dream forward.
Mr. Conrad, thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.